Every night, Evara slips into the forbidden forest to feed scraps to a massive black wolf with haunting yellow eyes, never knowing that the gentle beast watching her with such tender gratitude is actually Kieran, the exiled Alpha King, who's been desperately searching for the one person brave enough to show kindness to a monster. When the ruthless pack discovers their secret connection, Evara must choose between the safety of invisibility and a love that could either crown her as Luna or destroy them both. What happens when the wolf she's been protecting turns out to be the most powerful shifter in the realm, and he's been guarding her heart just as fiercely as she's been feeding his soul? The bucket slipped from Evara's hands, clattering against the stone floor as the kitchen scraps scattered everywhere. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she scrambled to gather the food bits, knowing that even one missing piece would mean trouble. The Highland Moonpack didn't tolerate waste, especially not from their lowest Omega. "Clumsy again," sneered Mira, the head cook, stepping over the mess without offering help. "Maybe if you spent less time daydreaming and more time working, you wouldn't be such a disaster." Evara's cheeks burned, but she kept her eyes down. Fighting back only made things worse. She'd learned that lesson years ago when her parents died in a hunting accident, leaving her alone in a pack that measured worth by strength and status. As the weakest Omega, she ranked below even the teenage wolves who hadn't shifted yet. The autumn wind howled through the cracks in the stone walls, making the candles flicker. Evara shivered as she finished collecting the scattered meat and bone scraps. Her thin dress did little to keep out the cold, but asking for warmer clothes would only invite mockery. The pack provided the bare minimum to keep her alive and working. "Don't forget to take the garbage out," Mira barked before disappearing into the main hall where the important wolves were eating their dinner. The sounds of laughter and conversation drifted through the doorway, a world Evara could hear but never join. She loaded the scraps into a fresh bucket, along with some leftover bread crusts and a chunk of meat that hadn't gone bad. The walk to the garbage pit would take her through the dark forest, but she didn't mind. The trees felt more welcoming than the cold stone walls of the pack house. The forest path crunched under her worn boots as she made her way deeper into the woods. Most pack members avoided this area after dark, claiming it felt wrong somehow. But Evara found peace in the silence, away from judging eyes and cruel words. Here, she could breathe without worrying about someone finding fault with how she did it. A twig snapped somewhere in the darkness ahead. Evara froze, her grip tightening on the bucket handle. Her weak Omega senses couldn't detect much, but something large was moving through the trees. Too large to be a rabbit or deer. Her mouth went dry as she remembered the warnings about rogues and wild animals that sometimes crossed into pack territory. Two golden eyes appeared in the shadows between the trees. The wolf was massive, bigger than any pack member she'd ever seen. Its black fur seemed to absorb the moonlight, making it look like a piece of living darkness. But instead of attacking, the creature simply watched her with an intelligence that made her skin prickle. "You're hungry, aren't you?" she whispered, surprised by her own boldness. The wolf's ears twitched forward, and something in its posture reminded her of the stray dogs that sometimes wandered through the village, proud but desperate. Without thinking, she set down the bucket and pulled out the chunk of good meat she'd saved. "Here!" She tossed it toward the wolf, not daring to get closer. "I know what it's like to be alone." The wolf padded forward with careful steps, never taking its eyes off her face. When it reached the meat, it sniffed once before eating with delicate bites, nothing like the savage feeding she'd expected. Those golden eyes kept watching her, and she could have sworn she saw gratitude in their depths. "I should go," she said softly, backing away. "They'll wonder where I am." The wolf made no move to follow as she hurried back toward the pack house, but she could feel its gaze on her back until she rounded the bend in the path. Her heart was still racing when she reached the kitchen, though she couldn't say if it was from fear or something else entirely. That night, she lay on her thin mattress in the Omega quarters, thinking about golden eyes and careful steps. The other Omegas snored around her, but sleep wouldn't come. She kept replaying the moment when the wolf had looked at her, really looked, like she mattered. For the first time in years, someone had accepted her kindness without question or mockery, even if that someone happened to have 4 legs and fangs. The next evening, she found herself taking the long way to the garbage pit again, her heart fluttering with nervous hope. Would the wolf return? Part of her expected to find nothing but empty forest, the encounter dismissed as a lonely girl's imagination. But there they were again, those golden eyes waiting in the shadows, watching her approach with what looked like anticipation. "You came back," she breathed, setting down her bucket. This time, she'd brought extra scraps, claiming she'd found them stuck to the bottom of a pot. The lie had come easily, driven by a need she couldn't name. "What are you doing out here alone?" The deep voice cut through the forest silence like a blade, making Evara spin so fast she nearly dropped her bucket of scraps. A man stepped out from behind an oak tree, tall and broad-shouldered, with storm-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her. Her heart hammered against her ribs as his scent hit her. Pine and leather and something wild that made her Omega instincts go haywire. "I asked you a question." His voice was softer now, but no less commanding. Everything about him screamed danger, from the way he moved like a predator to the power that seemed to roll off him in waves. Yet somehow, she didn't feel afraid. "I was just—" She gestured helplessly at the bucket, her words tangling in her throat. How could she explain about the wolf without sounding crazy? Taking out the garbage. His gray eyes dropped to the bucket, then swept the empty clearing where her mysterious wolf should have been waiting. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Long way to carry garbage. Heat flooded her cheeks. Of course he could tell she was lying. This man looked like he could read secrets written in starlight, while she'd never been good at hiding anything. "There's a pit deeper in the woods. For the really bad scraps." He stepped closer, and she caught another wave of that intoxicating scent. Her knees went weak, as every instinct screamed at her to submit to whatever this powerful male wanted. But instead of the cruel dominance she expected, his expression held something almost gentle. "Dangerous habit, little Omega. Wild things might follow you home." The pet name made her shiver, though she couldn't say why. No one had ever called her anything but her name, and usually not even that. "I can take care of myself." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I'm sure you can. What's your name?" "Evara." The answer slipped out before she could think better of it. Pack members rarely bothered learning Omega names, and strangers never cared enough to ask. "Evara." He repeated it like he was tasting wine, rolling the syllables on his tongue. Pretty name for a pretty girl. Now her whole face was burning. Pretty? Her? With her too thin frame and secondhand clothes and hair that never stayed where she put it? "Who are you?" "Kieran." He said it simply, like the name should mean something to her. When her face stayed blank, something that might have been relief crossed his features. "I'm new to the area. Still learning my way around." "You smell like Pack." The words popped out before she could stop them, and she immediately wished she could take them back. Commenting on someone's scent was incredibly rude, especially for an Omega addressing what was obviously a dominant wolf. But instead of getting angry, Kieran looked impressed. Good nose. Most Omegas can't detect much beyond their immediate surroundings. "I'm not most Omegas." The defensive response surprised them both. Evara usually kept her head down and her mouth shut, but something about this man made her want to stand taller. "No," he said quietly, studying her face with those storm-gray eyes. "I don't think you are." The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. An owl called somewhere in the distance, and leaves rustled overhead. But all Evara could focus on was the man standing just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. When had anyone ever looked at her like she mattered? "I should get back." She forced herself to take a step backward, though every cell in her body wanted to move closer. "They'll wonder where I am. Will they?" There was something sharp in his voice now, like he knew exactly how little her pack cared about one missing Omega. "What happens if you're late?" The question caught her off guard. "Nothing. I mean, they might. It doesn't matter. It matters to me." The simple statement hit her like a physical blow. When was the last time anyone had cared about her well-being? When had someone's eyes followed her with concern instead of annoyance or dismissal? "Why?" she whispered. Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "Because someone should. Because kindness is rare enough in this world that it deserves protection." "You don't know anything about me." I know you walk alone through dangerous woods to feed scraps to wild animals. His eyes found hers again, and she saw something burning in their depths. I know you do it not because you have to, but because you want to. That tells me everything I need to know. How did he know about the wolf? She'd been so careful, so quiet, unless... Have you been watching me? The forest has eyes, he said, which wasn't really an answer at all. Go home, Evara, but be careful on the path. Not all the wild things out here are as harmless as they seem. She wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to demand real answers instead of cryptic warnings. But something in his stance suggested the conversation was over. With shaking hands, she picked up her bucket and started back toward the pack house. Evara. His voice stopped her at the edge of the clearing. When she turned back, he was just a shadow among the trees again, barely visible in the moonlight. Sweet dreams. The words followed her all the way home, echoing in her mind as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. Who was Kieran? Why had he been in the forest? And why did his scent seem so familiar, like something from a half-remembered dream? Most confusing of all, where was her wolf? The morning sun painted the pack house, walls, gold, but inside, darkness crept through every hallway like smoke. Evara pressed her back against the cold stone as heavy footsteps thundered past her hiding spot. Something had changed overnight, and the air itself seemed to buzz with dangerous energy. He's back, whispered Maya, another Omega who worked in the kitchens. Her face was white as fresh snow. The lost prince returned at dawn. Evara's heart skipped. What lost prince? Alpha Thorn's son, the one who vanished 7 years ago after that terrible fight. Maya's hands shook as she stacked breakfast plates. They say he challenged his own father and lost everything. Now he's home, and the whole pack is walking on broken glass. The name hit Evara like lightning before Maya even spoke it. Kieran Blackwood, the heir who was supposed to be our next Alpha King. Her basket of kitchen scraps tumbled from numb fingers. Kieran, the gentle stranger from the forest. The man with storm-gray eyes who had appeared the same night her wolf vanished. Her chest felt tight, like invisible ropes were squeezing all the air from her lungs. You look sick, Maya said, reaching for her arm. Are you okay? But Evara was already running. She burst through the back door and into the crisp morning air, her feet carrying her toward the one place that made sense anymore. The forest called to her like an old friend, promising answers among the ancient trees. When she reached the oak, her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. No golden eyes waited in the shadows. No gentle giant watched her with patient hunger. Just empty space where magic used to live. She sank to her knees and pressed her palms against the earth. 3 days. 3 long nights without her mysterious companion. And now she knew why. The timing was too perfect, too cruel. Her wolf hadn't abandoned her. He had transformed into something else entirely. This is impossible, she whispered to the morning breeze. But even as the words left her lips, puzzle pieces clicked together in her mind. Kieran's familiar scent, the way he had known exactly where to find her. His strange questions about feeding wild creatures. A twig snapped behind her, and she spun around with tears still wet on her cheeks. Beta Marcus stepped from between 2 pine trees, his face hard as winter stone. He was Alpha Thorn's right hand, the enforcer who kept lower wolves in line. Omega Evara, he said, and his voice could have frozen a summer lake. You've been coming here every night for weeks. She scrambled to her feet, wiping her face with shaking hands. I wasn't doing anything wrong, weren't you? He moved closer, and she caught the scent of anger rolling off him in waves. These are dangerous times, little Omega. Strange wolves have been spotted at our borders. Enemies who might use foolish pack members to gather information. I would never. Of course not. You're too weak and simple for real betrayal. His cruel smile made her stomach turn. But weakness can be just as dangerous as evil, especially now that certain complications have returned to our territory. He meant Kieran. The way Marcus spat the word complications left no doubt. I don't understand, she lied, though understanding was burning through her like wildfire. Then let me make it clear. Marcus stepped close enough that she could smell coffee on his breath. Stay away from the air. Stay away from these woods. Some paths lead to destruction, and Omegas who forget their place have a habit of dragging others down with them. Fear crawled up her spine like ice-cold fingers. Are you threatening me? I'm protecting the pack, and sometimes protection requires difficult choices. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Evara? Your nighttime friend won't be coming back. Wild creatures have a way of disappearing when they're no longer needed. The words hit her like physical blows. Marcus knew. Somehow, he knew about her wolf, about the secret meetings that had become the brightest part of her lonely life. She waited until his footsteps faded before allowing fresh tears to fall. The forest felt empty now, hollow in a way that made her chest ache. Even the birds seemed quieter, as if they mourned her loss alongside her. But beneath the grief, something else stirred. Anger, hot and bright as forge fire. For years, she had accepted her place at the bottom of the pack hierarchy. She had eaten scraps, worn cast-off clothes, and hidden in corners while stronger wolves claimed the sunlight. Now they wanted to steal even her secret friendship, the one pure thing in her difficult life. No, she whispered to the empty clearing. The word felt strange on her lips, foreign after a lifetime of submission. Not this time. She picked up her scattered food scraps and arranged them carefully beneath the oak tree. Her wolf might not come anymore, but the ritual mattered. It was her choice, her small rebellion against a world that had never offered her kindness. As she walked back toward the pack house, Evara's mind raced with dangerous questions. If Kieran really was her mysterious wolf, what did that mean? Why had the heir to the Alpha throne spent his nights watching a worthless Omega? And what had happened 7 years ago that sent him into exile? The morning sun climbed higher, promising heat and light. But inside her chest, something cold and determined was growing. She had spent her whole life being invisible, accepting whatever crumbs the pack threw her way. Maybe it was time to start asking for more. Dinner in the Great Hall felt like sitting inside a thunderstorm that hadn't broken yet. Evara hunched over her bowl of thin soup, trying to disappear into the stone wall at her back. Around her, pack members whispered behind their hands and shot nervous glances toward the head table, where Alpha Thorn sat like a king carved from ice. Beside him, in the chair that had been empty for 7 long years, sat Kieran. Even from across the enormous room, his presence pulled at her like a magnet. He wore simple clothes, dark pants, and a gray shirt, but power radiated from him like heat from a bonfire. When he turned his head to scan the crowd, she caught a glimpse of those storm-colored eyes that had haunted her dreams. "Stop staring," hissed Nora, the Omega girl beside her. "Do you want to get us all in trouble?" But Evara couldn't look away. Every line of Kieran's face was burned into her memory from their forest encounter. The strong jaw, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the gentle curve of his mouth when he had spoken her name. Had those same lips once pressed against raw meat she'd left beneath the oak tree? The thought made her dizzy. "The air looks different," whispered Tom, a young Omega who worked in the stables. "Bigger than before. Scarred." It was true. 7 years had changed Kieran from boy to man. Muscles filled his shirt, and thin white lines marked his hands where old wounds had healed. These were the marks of someone who had survived terrible things. "Where do you think he's been all this time?" Nora asked. Before anyone could answer, Alpha Thorn rose to his feet. The hall fell silent so quickly that Evara could hear her own heartbeat. "Pack members?" Thorn's voice boomed across the room like thunder. "Tonight we welcome home, my son. The heir has returned to us after, learning important lessons about leadership." The way he said learning made it sound like torture. Kieran stood slowly, and Evara held her breath. When he spoke, his voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher around the edges. "Thank you, Father." The word dripped with carefully controlled emotion. "I'm grateful for this second chance to serve Highland Moonpack." Polite applause scattered through the hall, but Evara heard the fear underneath it. No one was quite sure what to make of the prodigal son's return. "My heir will be resuming his duties immediately," Thorn continued, "starting with border patrols and security assessments. Recent reports suggest unusual activity in our territory." Evara's blood turned to ice water. Border patrols meant the deep forest, the places where she had been meeting her wolf. If Kieran was assigned to patrol those areas... Furthermore, Thorn's voice grew harder. All pack members are reminded that unauthorized ventures into packlands are strictly forbidden. Anyone found violating this rule will face immediate discipline. The message was clear. Her nighttime journeys were now officially dangerous. As the crowd began to disperse, Evara kept her head down and tried to slip away unnoticed. But fate had other plans. A warm hand touched her shoulder, and she looked up into Beta Marcus's cold smile. "Omega Evara," he said loudly enough for nearby wolves to hear. "The Alpha has a special assignment for you." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "An assignment? You'll be helping with the heir's transition, cleaning his quarters, preparing his meals, handling his laundry." Marcus's eyes glittered with malice. Such an honor for a low-ranking Omega. Around them, other pack members exchanged meaningful looks. Being assigned to serve the heir was either a great privilege or a dangerous trap. From Marcus's expression, Evara suspected the latter. "I don't think—" she started. "The Alpha's orders aren't suggestions." Marcus cut her off. "You'll report to the heir's chambers first thing tomorrow morning." "And Evara?" He leaned closer, speaking so softly only she could hear. "Remember what we discussed about knowing your place." Fear and anger warred in her chest as Marcus walked away. This was punishment for her forest trips. She was sure of it. They were putting her close to Kieran as some kind of test or trap. But as she made her way back to the Omega quarters, a different thought crept into her mind. If she was assigned to serve Kieran, she would have chances to speak with him privately. Chances to ask the questions that were driving her crazy with curiosity. The next morning came too quickly. Evara stood outside Kieran's door with fresh linens in her arms and her heart beating like a trapped bird. She had barely slept, spending the night rehearsing what she would say. The door opened before she could knock. Kieran filled the doorway, dressed but barefoot, his hair still damp from washing. Up close, the changes in him were even more obvious. Scars marked his collarbone and disappeared beneath his shirt. His hands were calloused from hard work. But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had watched her so gently in the forest, remained exactly the same. "Evara," he said, and her name on his lips was like music. "Your Highness." She dropped into an awkward curtsy, nearly dropping the linens. "I'm here to— I know why you're here." He stepped aside to let her enter. Marcus made sure everyone understood my new domestic arrangements. His room was larger than the space she shared with 5 other Omegas. But somehow it felt empty. A few pieces of simple furniture, clothes folded neatly on a chair, nothing personal except a wooden carving on the nightstand. Evara's breath caught. Even from across the room, she could see it was a wolf. "You can start with whatever you think needs doing," Kieran said, settling into a chair by the window. "I'll try to stay out of your way." But as she began changing the bed linens, she felt his eyes on her like gentle fire. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions and impossible possibilities. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. "The wolf carving," she said without looking at him. "It's beautiful." "Thank you." His voice was carefully neutral. "I made it during my time away, to remind me of home. It looks so real, like it might come alive and walk right off the table." A long pause. Then, "Some things are more real than others." She turned to face him and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Hope and fear and something deeper all mixed together. "Your Highness," she whispered, "can I ask you something?" "Kieran." "Just Kieran." He leaned forward slightly. "And yes, you can ask me anything." Her hands twisted in the fresh sheets. "Where were you? During the 7 years you were gone?" His smile was sadder than tears. "Closer than you might think, and farther than you could imagine." It wasn't really an answer, but something in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. She had the strangest feeling they were talking about 2 different conversations at the same time. "I should let you get back to work," Kieran said, standing. "But Evara, thank you." "For what?" He moved to the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. "For treating the heir's return like it matters." After he left, Evara sank onto the edge of his bed and stared at the wooden wolf. Her hands were shaking, and she didn't know if it was from fear or excitement. Tomorrow, she would come back. And maybe tomorrow she would be brave enough to ask the questions that really mattered. The old barn door creaked open just as Evara finished counting the grain sacks. Her heart jumped into her throat when she saw Kieran standing there, his clothes torn and bloody from what looked like a terrible fight. "Don't come any closer," she whispered. But her feet stayed planted like tree roots. Something was different about him tonight. His eyes held secrets that made her stomach flutter with both fear and excitement. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice rough as sandpaper. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead, and she could smell the metallic scent mixing with his usual pine smell. "About the wolf you've been feeding." Her hands started shaking. How did he know about her secret visits to the forest? She'd never told anyone about the gentle giant with yellow eyes who waited for her every night. "What wolf?" she lied, but the words came out too fast and too high. Kieran stepped closer, and she noticed he was limping. His left leg dragged slightly, like it was hurt bad. "The black one," he said softly. "The one who watches you with eyes that know too much." Her breath caught. Those were the exact words she'd whispered to herself just last week while watching her mysterious friend eat. The barn felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. Hay dust danced in the moonlight streaming through the broken roof, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear pack wolves howling. It sounded angry, like they were hunting something. "You're scaring me," she admitted, wrapping her arms around herself. But it wasn't entirely true. Part of her was scared, yes, but another part was thrilled that someone finally knew her secret. Kieran reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in soft cloth. "I've been carrying this for 7 years, he said, his voice so quiet she had to lean forward to hear, waiting for the right person to give it to. He unwrapped the cloth slowly, like he was revealing buried treasure. Inside was a tiny wooden wolf, carved so perfectly she could see each individual piece of fur. The detail was amazing, like whoever made it had spent hundreds of hours getting every whisker exactly right. "It's beautiful," she breathed, reaching out before stopping herself. "But why are you showing me?" Her heart was beating so fast she was sure he could hear it. The wooden wolf seemed to glow in the moonlight, its little carved eyes looking almost alive. "Because," Kieran said, placing it gently in her palm, "I carved it while thinking about someone who showed kindness to a monster." The wood was warm, like it had been sitting by a fire. As her fingers traced the tiny ears, she felt something impossible stirring in her chest. A memory that wasn't quite a memory. A feeling of being watched by grateful eyes. "I don't understand," she whispered. But deep down, something was starting to click into place, like puzzle pieces finding their match. "The first night you brought food to the forest," Kieran continued, "you said something that changed everything." He was so close now she could see flecks of gold in his gray eyes. "You said, everyone deserves kindness, even the scary ones. Do you remember?" She did remember. She'd been so nervous that night, talking to herself to build up courage. The big wolf had seemed so lonely, sitting there in the shadows. "You were listening?" The question came out as barely a whisper. How was that possible? She'd never seen any other person in the forest during her nighttime visits. Just her wolf, patient and quiet, always keeping his distance but never leaving. "I was closer than you think," Kieran said, and something in his voice made her skin prickle with goosebumps. Outside, the howling grew louder. It sounded like the whole pack was moving through the forest, searching for something. Or someone. Kieran's head snapped toward the door, and she saw his muscles tense like he was ready to fight or run. "They're looking for me," he said grimly. "I wasn't supposed to come back to pack territory. Not after what happened 7 years ago." "What happened 7 years ago?" Evara asked, clutching the wooden wolf tighter. But before he could answer, heavy footsteps pounded outside the barn. Multiple sets of feet, moving fast and angry. Kieran pressed a finger to his lips, then grabbed her hand and pulled her behind a stack of hay bales. "Promise me something," he whispered urgently as voices shouted commands in the distance. "Whatever happens next, whatever you learn about me, remember that wooden wolf. Remember that someone spent years carving it while thinking about your kindness." His eyes were desperate now, like he was trying to memorize her face. "Can you promise me that?" She nodded, even though she had no idea what she was promising. The wooden wolf felt heavier in her hand, like it was full of secrets waiting to spill out. Through the barn walls, she could hear Beta Marcus's voice barking orders. "Find the exile. He's somewhere in this sector." The barn door exploded inward with a crash that made Evara's ears ring. 6 pack enforcers poured through the opening like angry water through a broken dam, their eyes glowing with hunt fury in the darkness. Beta Marcus led them, his face twisted into a snarl that showed all his teeth. "There you are, exile," he growled, pointing a thick finger at Kieran. "Did you really think you could sneak back onto our territory without consequences?" Evara's heart hammered against her ribs as she crouched behind the hay bales. The wooden wolf dug into her palm, where she gripped it tight, its tiny carved edges cutting into her skin. She wanted to run, wanted to disappear, but her legs felt like they were made of stone. This was all wrong. Kieran wasn't supposed to be in danger because of her. "I came back for what's mine," Kieran said, stepping away from their hiding spot. His voice was different now, deeper and more dangerous. Power rolled off him in waves that made the air feel heavy and electric. Even the enforcers took a small step back, though they tried to hide it. 7 years of exile doesn't change bloodlines, Marcus. Bloodlines? Beta Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced and fake. You gave up any claim to bloodlines when you challenged Alpha Thorn and lost. The other enforcers spread out in a half circle, blocking the exits. Their hands were shifting into claws, ready for a fight. Evara had seen pack discipline before, but never directed at someone who felt so important. "I didn't lose," Kieran said quietly, and the temperature in the barn seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I chose exile over civil war. There's a difference." He rolled his shoulders, and Evara heard bones popping like twigs. Something was happening to him, something that made her wolf senses scream warning she didn't understand. Then she smelled it, that wild forest scent she knew so well, growing stronger by the second. Her wooden wolf felt warm in her hand, almost burning. "No," she whispered, the pieces finally crashing together in her mind. It can't be. But even as she said it, she knew it was true. The yellow eyes, the gentle way he'd always kept his distance, the intelligence that had seemed too human for a regular wolf. "What can't be, little Omega?" Beta Marcus had heard her whisper. His head swiveled toward the hay bales like a snake tracking prey. "Come out, come out! Let's see who the exile brought to his execution." 2 enforcers moved toward her hiding spot, their claws extended and ready to drag her into the open. "Touch her and die," Kieran snarled. The sound that came from his throat wasn't entirely human anymore. It carried the promise of violence that made every wolf in the barn freeze mid-step. "She has nothing to do with pack politics." But his eyes found hers through a gap in the hay, and she saw the truth burning there like yellow fire. "Nothing to do with it?" Marcus laughed again, and this time it was genuinely amused. "The Omega who's been sneaking into forbidden territory every night for a month. The one who's been leaving food for unknown creatures." Evara's blood turned to ice water. They'd been watching her. All this time, she'd thought her secret was safe. She was feeding a stray, Kieran said, but his voice had an edge of desperation now. A lone wolf with no pack. That's not against pack law. The enforcers looked uncertain for a moment. Feeding strays wasn't technically forbidden, just strongly discouraged. But Marcus's grin grew wider, showing teeth that were getting sharper by the second. "A stray?" he repeated. "Is that what you call yourself now, heir?" The word hit the barn like a lightning strike. Heir. Kieran wasn't just any exile. He was Alpha Thorn's son, the lost prince of Highland Moonpack. Evara's legs finally gave out, and she slumped against the hay bales as the full truth crashed over her like a freezing wave. "She didn't know," Kieran said desperately. "I never told her who I was. She thought she was helping an ordinary wolf." His hands were shaking now, and she could see fur starting to sprout along his arms. The change was coming whether he wanted it or not. "Leave her out of this, Marcus. Your fight is with me." "Leave her out?" Marcus's eyes gleamed with cruel satisfaction. "The Omega who's been consorting with an exile? Who's been sneaking around pack territory like a spy?" He gestured to his enforcers. "Bring her out. Alpha Thorn will want to question them both." Heavy hands reached for her, dragging her from behind the hay bales despite her struggles. The moment they touched her, Kieran exploded into motion, but it wasn't human motion anymore. His clothes shredded as bones lengthened and muscles rippled. Dark fur erupted across his skin like wildfire. His face stretched into a muzzle full of gleaming fangs. In seconds, the man she'd been talking to was gone, replaced by the massive black wolf she'd been feeding for a month. But this wasn't the gentle giant from the forest. This wolf radiated fury and protective rage that filled the barn like smoke. His yellow eyes locked onto the enforcers holding her, and the growl that rumbled from his chest made the wooden walls shake. This was an alpha wolf in full fury, and suddenly everyone in the barn remembered why Kieran had been considered the most dangerous fighter in pack history. The stories were true. One of the enforcers whispered, his grip on Evara's arm going slack. He really is a monster. But Evara looked into those blazing yellow eyes and saw something else entirely. She saw the lonely creature who'd waited patiently for her visits. She saw the gentle soul who'd never approached too close, never frightened her, never demanded more than she was willing to give. "You're not a monster," she said softly, her voice cutting through the tension like a silver blade. "You're just hungry." And she pulled the wooden wolf from her pocket, holding it up so the firelight caught its carved features. "You carved this while thinking of me, didn't you? While remembering someone who wasn't afraid." The ground shook as Kieran's massive wolf form landed between Evara and his snarling father. Alpha Thorn's claws gleamed in the moonlight, ready to strike down the Omega who had dared to love his son. But something incredible happened next. Every wolf in the pack began to shift, their howls filling the night air like thunder. They weren't howling in anger or fear. They were howling in recognition of their true alpha king. Evara pressed her back against the ancient oak tree, her heart hammering so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. The wooden wolf carving felt warm in her palm, almost alive with magic she didn't understand. Around her, the most powerful werewolves in the territory were bowing their heads to the black beast she had been feeding scraps to for months. "This changes nothing," Alpha Thorn roared, his voice cutting through the howls. "She's still just an Omega, weak, worthless, not fit to stand beside a king." Kieran's golden eyes blazed with fury that made even his father step backward. The massive wolf began to shift, bones cracking and reshaping, until the man stood tall and proud in the clearing. When he spoke, his voice carried the power of a true alpha, the kind that made other wolves want to follow, not fear. "You're wrong, father. Dead wrong." Kieran's words rang across the silent pack. Evara showed kindness to a creature everyone else would have killed. She saw past the monster to find the soul beneath. That takes more courage than any battle I've ever fought. Beta Marcus stepped forward, his face twisted with confusion and anger. But Alpha Thorn is right. Pack law states that Omegas cannot mate with Alphas. It's been our way for hundreds of years. Pack law also states that the strongest wolf leads. Kieran shot back. "And I've just shown you all who that is." Evara felt tears burning her eyes, but not from sadness. For the first time in her life, someone was fighting for her. Someone believed she was worth protecting. The feeling was so overwhelming she could barely breathe. Old Martha, the pack's eldest wolf, stepped out from the crowd. Her ancient voice carried across the clearing like wind through leaves. "I remember when the moon goddess first blessed our kind. She said that true strength comes not from power over others, but from the courage to love without fear." "Fairy tales," Alpha Thorn spat. "We live in the real world now." "Do we?" Martha's eyes twinkled with secrets older than the forest itself. "Then explain why this Omega's scent has been changing for weeks, why she glows with inner light that grows stronger each day." Evara gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. She had noticed changes, unusual tiredness, heightened senses, a strange pull toward moonlit nights. But she had blamed it on stress from hiding her forest visits. Kieran's head snapped toward her, his nostrils flaring as he caught her scent properly for the first time. His eyes went wide with wonder and something that looked like joy. "Evara," he whispered, and the name sounded like a prayer. "What's happening to me?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Martha smiled, her weathered face creasing with happiness. "The moon goddess has blessed your union, child. New life grows within you. Life that carries both omega gentleness and alpha strength. The pack erupted into shocked murmurs. Alpha Thorn's face went white with rage and fear. In all his years of rule, he had never seen the goddess show favor so clearly. Impossible, he snarled. Omegas can't carry alpha pups. The bloodline would be too powerful. Unless, Martha said slowly, the goddess herself approves of the match. Kieran moved to Evara's side in 2 quick steps, his arms wrapping around her protectively. She could feel him trembling, not with fear, but with overwhelming emotion. When she looked up at his face, she saw tears streaming down his cheeks. "You're carrying my child," he breathed against her hair. "Our child." The wonder in his voice made her heart soar. All her life, she had been told she was nothing special, just another Omega, meant to serve and fade into the background. But now she carried new life that even the moon goddess had chosen to bless. Alpha Thorn let out a roar of fury that echoed through the trees. "I will not allow this abomination to stand. Challenge me, boy, if you think you can take my place, but know that I will show no mercy." Kieran's grip on Evara tightened for just a moment before he gently set her aside. When he turned to face his father, power radiated from every inch of his body. The exile had changed him, made him stronger in ways that went beyond muscle and claw. "I accept your challenge," he said, his voice calm and steady. "But when I win, things will change around here. No more treating pack members like they're worth less than dirt. No more ruling through fear. And if you lose?" Alpha Thorn's smile was cruel and sharp. Kieran glanced back at Evara, his golden eyes soft with love. "Then at least I'll have fought for something worth dying for." The 2 wolves began to circle each other, and Evara realized that everything, her future, her child's future, the pack's future, would be decided in the next few minutes. 6 months later, Evara stood at the window of what had once been Alpha Thorn's office, watching spring paint the forest in shades of green she had never noticed before. Her hand rested on her growing belly, where tiny kicks reminded her daily that miracles really did happen. The morning sickness had finally passed, replaced by an energy that seemed to glow from within. "Luna Evara," came a soft voice from the doorway. "The morning patrol reports are ready for your review." She turned to see Sarah, a young beta who had once looked right through her in the pack kitchens. Now Sarah's eyes held nothing but respect and genuine warmth. The change still felt strange, but Evara was learning to accept her new role with grace. "Thank you, Sarah. Any problems I should know about?" "Nothing serious, Luna. A few rogue wolves testing our borders, but they moved on when they caught Alpha Kieran's scent markers." Evara smiled at the mention of her mate's name. Even now, months after their mating ceremony under the full moon, her heart still fluttered when she thought about him. The great Alpha King, who had once prowled the forest as a lonely beast, now ruled with wisdom and kindness that amazed even the oldest pack members. The challenge fight between Kieran and his father had lasted less than 10 minutes. Years of exile had honed Kieran's skills, while his father had grown soft from easy victories. When it ended, Alpha Thorn lay defeated but alive. Kieran had refused to kill him, choosing mercy over revenge. It was a decision that had shocked the pack and cemented their loyalty to their new leader. "Luna?" Sarah's voice brought Evara back to the present. "There's something else. The kitchen staff wanted me to ask about the menu for tonight's feast. It's the anniversary of Alpha Kieran's return. Tell them to prepare his favorites," Evara said, her mind already planning the celebration. "And make sure there's plenty of that honey cake he loves so much." After Sarah left, Evara walked through the pack house that had become her home. Every room held memories now, laughter echoing from the dining hall where she had once served scraps, the library where Kieran read to her in the evenings, the nursery they were preparing together for their coming child. She found Kieran in the training yard, working with a group of teenage wolves who hung on his every word. His shirt was off despite the cool spring air, and sweat gleamed on muscles that still made her mouth go dry. When he noticed her watching, his face lit up with the same joy she saw every morning when he woke beside her. "That's enough for today," he told his students. "Practice those moves we worked on, and remember, true strength protects, it doesn't just destroy." The teenagers scattered with happy grins, and Kieran jogged over to where Evara waited. His hands went immediately to her belly, his touch gentle as he felt for movement. "How are my two favorite wolves today?" he asked, pressing a soft kiss to her lips. "Your daughter has been practicing her kicks all morning," Evara laughed. "I think she's going to be a fighter like her father. Or maybe she'll be gentle and wise like her mother," Kieran said, his golden eyes warm with love. "Either way, she'll be perfect." They walked together through the forest where their love story had begun. The old oak tree still stood tall and proud, though now it held different memories. Sometimes, young couples from the pack came here to exchange promises under its branches, calling it the blessing tree. "Do you ever regret it?" Evara asked as they settled against the familiar trunk. "Giving up your exile to come home? Taking on all the responsibilities of leadership?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his fingers playing with her hair in the way that always made her sleepy. "I regret wasting 7 years being angry and bitter," he finally said. "But I don't regret the path that led me to you. Even the dark years taught me things I needed to know." "Like what?" "Like how precious simple kindness really is. Like how much courage it takes to love someone without expecting anything back." His voice grew soft with memory. "Like how one person's faith can save a soul everyone else thinks is lost." Evara leaned against his chest, listening to the steady heartbeat that had become her favorite sound. Around them, the forest hummed with new life, birds building nests, flowers pushing through soil, everything reaching toward the sun. "I have something to tell you," she said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. Kieran tensed beneath her. "What is it? Is everything okay?" She laughed at the worry in his voice, the same protective instinct that had made him such a good alpha. "Everything's wonderful. Old Martha examined me yesterday. She says the baby is definitely a girl, just like we thought. But there's more." "More?" Evara turned in his arms so she could see his face when she told him. "She's not just any alpha pup, Kieran. Martha says her power signature is unlike anything she's ever seen. Our daughter is going to be something special. Maybe even more powerful than both of us combined." Kieran's expression went through a dozen emotions before settling on pure, overwhelming love. "The moon goddess really did bless our union," he whispered. "First she gave me you, and now she's giving us a child who could change everything for our kind. Are you ready for that? Having a daughter who might be destined for greatness?" Kieran's smile was brighter than the spring sunshine filtering through the leaves above them. "With you as her mother? She could rule the world, and I'd be proud every single day." As if responding to her parents' voices, the baby kicked strongly enough that Kieran could feel it through Evara's dress. His wonder never faded, no matter how many times it happened. "Hello, little one," he murmured to Evara's belly. "Your mama and I can't wait to meet you." The future stretched before them, full of challenges and changes, but also full of love. Their pack was thriving under Kieran's leadership. Other territories were asking to form alliances rather than wage wars. And somewhere in the forest, a new generation of wolves was learning that strength and kindness could exist in the same heart. As the sun set through the trees, painting everything golden, Evara closed her eyes and sent a prayer of thanks to the moon goddess, who had turned a lonely omega and an exiled alpha into something neither had dared to dream possible.